everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp. Thanks for joining me today. An important show, as always. I'm going to be covering new revelations about how exactly Israel and former IDF are writing U.S. news for everybody across this country. I'm going to be covering a lot of other stories as well. And there is breaking news that Israel has killed Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas. And also, I'm going to bring you new revelations in terms of how exactly Israel might collapse within the next year. But all that is coming up soon. But I want to start off with our guest I'm very excited to have here. I haven't seen her in a couple of years. But I used to work with her at RT. She did great reporting for RT America. And of course, I was there doing my silly comedy show, Redacted Tonight. And anyway, she is being chased off the internet and off the radio waves, as am I. But more recent updates on that for her. Please welcome Rachel Blevins. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a while since we've chatted. Probably since or within, maybe I might have had you on to chat about it within weeks of when RT shuttered, but it's been a while. And yeah, you were, I knew you while we were there. You were a reporter and I was doing my show, but of course that went down 2.5 years ago, something like that, 2 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's been 2.5, hasn't it?
Yeah, 2.5 years. Doesn't seem like it. And you have since, you had a show on Sputnik Radio, which is kind of the RT America equivalent of radio in the United States. And they have just shut down this week, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So in the same way that we had the production company that created content for RT, you also have this other production company that created content for Sputnik Radio. And they were registered as a foreign agent, right? They went through, checked all of the boxes that they were told to do so by the US government. But then last month, the Biden administration came out with a new round of sanctions. They specifically targeted RT and their parent company in Russia. So that put this production company based in DC in a position where they're kind of going, okay, we can't get funding from the same place anymore. They were trying to figure out what to do and ultimately ended up having to shut down, which happened this week. So yeah, we knew that there was some sort of a shutdown coming. It was interesting because I was comparing it to the RT America shutdown in a recent video that I did. And I remember at the time in the spring of 2022, I at least, I can speak for myself, I was shocked by RT America shutting down, right? I thought, no, surely they're doing everything that they need to do. They're complying with the US government. There's no way they would just close down.
And so quickly. It was like, it was like a couple of days, it went from everything running as usual to everything's over.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We come in the office on March 3rd and they're like, all right, that's it. We're done. And so we didn't know when our last show actually was. Well, in this case with Sputnik, they told us the day of, they said, hey, it's your last show. And I think after doing a last show, I realized I don't want to know, right? I just want to be able to go and do the last show and then be told. But yeah, it's always hard. I mean, in the same way what we went through with RT, you have so many incredible employees there. And one of the things that we all talk about is that we're here at this network because we're allowed to cover the stories that we want to cover and we're allowed to say what we want to say. And it was the exact same way working with Sputnik. And yeah, it's always hard to kind of go through something like that and see, especially all of the people behind the scenes that are impacted by this, that have been there for years. And yeah, I guess I'm 2 for 2 on Russia related shutdowns now.
But you've also, outside of both those could be considered Russian media or adjacent, but you've been chased around the internet as well, like I have in some regards. Just last week, they banned your YouTube channel, but now you've gotten your videos back, right?
Yeah, so it was interesting in the last couple of weeks. It started out with a notice from YouTube, right? I wake up to emails saying that I'd had 4 videos removed. They claimed that they were removed for hate speech. And the one thing that they all had in common was they were all Ukraine related. It was like one of the videos I was literally quoting YouTube's own policy back to them back in 2022, talking about how they were going to go after quote unquote Ukraine related misinformation. The other 3 videos were all interviews with guests who had been censored by YouTube in some way. And that's part of this new purge that they seem to be pulling back just a little bit on it. But of course, we know YouTube censorship is still running rampant. And they're rolling out these policies saying, hey, if your channel gets taken down, it's not just you and your content. You can't appear on anyone else's YouTube channels either, right? They're trying to just erase your presence altogether. So I started off with that. And then a few days later, I get the message that, okay, my channel has been taken down altogether. Again, they claim it's for hate speech. They don't tell me what I did, right? They don't tell me what specific phrase it was. They just say it was severe or repeated violations of hate speech. And I got that email on a Sunday. And so, of course, the first thing I do is I go to Twitter or X and I'm talking about it, putting it out there. That initial post got 1 million views in less than 24 hours. And I was shocked because my content does not get that kind of a response whatsoever.
Yeah.
But what I found was that a lot of people were also concerned about their channels being taken down and about, okay, well, if you got taken down for quote unquote hate speech, then what's that to say that any of my videos posted in the last several years couldn't be targeted and taken down? And so, yeah, by Tuesday afternoon, they sent me another email saying that they had reinstated my channel and specifically throwing in there, we know that your channel is very important to you and your audience. So I thought that that part was really interesting. That I'm like, I know that they got a good amount of backlash over that. And I'm grateful for that because so often when YouTube channels are removed, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, we deal with it. We move on. You know, we do more on Rumble and Rockfin and other platforms. But I was very grateful that myself, Mark Sloboda, DD Geopolitics, Glenn Deason, and a few others, that our channels were reinstated. And it was interesting to see that, okay, there was some public pressure there and YouTube actually did back down for once.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see that. It is fairly rare, but and have you been I've been suppressed or deleted from other platforms as well. The week we lost our jobs in 2022, there was a separate Redacted Night YouTube channel that was banned around the world, as were most channels that had anything to do with RT. But then I also had my podcast deleted by Spotify that week. And then just this past December, I'd only been really using it for 2 months. My TikTok was banned with no reason, no right to appeal, no nothing. Have you had stuff like that?
Wow, so they just heard that you were the most censored comedian on the internet, and they were like, "We have to keep adding to this, right? We have to keep
They didn't
leveling
want
up."
to get left out of the
Right.
event. Yeah.
Exactly. I haven't had it to that effect. What's interesting is a lot of the censorship that I've gone through was actually before even the last couple of years. Because even after everything started in 2022, I actually moved to Moscow for a year and worked for RT there. And I was posting videos and vlogs and, here's what life is like in Russia, right? This is what it's like to be an American here, because that's not really being shown on the media. And I was surprised by the fact that YouTube just kind of allowed those videos to be, because I've noticed that they've been really cracking down on other quote unquote vlog content and that sort of thing in Russia. But a lot of the censorship that I've been through, and let's knock on wood, nothing recently beyond the YouTube takedown, had been before when I was working as an independent journalist before I came to RT America. And I had my Facebook page removed back in 2018. And it's interesting to see kind of the progression that we've been through with this, right? You go back to Russiagate and everything that we've been through since, where it's like the US establishment has been working with big tech to get us to this point where they can just wipe off your life's work from their platform. And it's like, oh, sorry, that's on you, right? There's nothing you can do about it. There's no, a hotline that you can call to say, hey, I need help. My channel was just taken down. No specific person you can talk to. And I think that that's incredibly concerning, especially for those of us who do so much work on the internet, to think that we could just be erased from it completely, have our work taken down, and we have no form of recourse on our end.
I know it is funny. People, you often like when my Facebook page, which at the time was my largest platform in 2016, it gets shadow banned to the point where I've never gained followers ever since 2016. Um, People kind of shrug on stuff like that when if it were a restaurant and you'd spent a decade building it up so people come there a lot, and then the city's like, well, we're going to build a wall in front of it that blocks off the door, but we're building it on the public property on the sidewalk, so that's perfectly fine. It seems like it would be a bigger, like, people would be pissed off, like, this person spent a decade building up this restaurant, how dare you block it off? But with online stuff, that seems to be the reality.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of it like that. But yeah, you're right. Now that you mention it, that reminds me, so I had my Facebook page was removed. It was almost to 70,000 followers back in 2018. And a few months later, I came along, I made a new one, and I just casually was posting my stuff on there. I wasn't putting much work into it, but I went through a phase where I was actually getting tens of thousands of views on my videos. And then last year, I think around October 7th last year, that came to a screeching halt. And I have not gained followers. I think I'm stuck at like 11,000 followers. I have not surpassed 11,000 followers and only gotten, a couple hundred views on each video. And it's crazy how, exactly as you're saying there, Facebook can come in and just go, no, you're done. And they don't even have to remove you. But just that shadow ban makes it so that you're not showing up in anyone's feeds. You're not getting any sort of growth on your end, and you're not generating, I guess, whatever revenue you could be getting from that page.
Amazes me that they waited until a year ago to do that to you.
I know. Not that it was growing drastically otherwise, but it was interesting how it was like I was making some steady growth, and then all of a sudden I look over and I'm like, oh, wait a second, that has never grown past that number.
Yeah, that's done. I want to ask you about, you've probably been following more closely than I have, honestly, updates on what's going on in Ukraine. And, I talk about it here and there, but it seems like the U.S. won't allow any peace talks to actually go forward, any diplomatic solutions. So do you have any updates on where things stand, where they seem like they're headed?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've heard, but Zelensky has this magical victory plan that's going to solve everything.
Oh, good.
Well, it's been fascinating to watch that. And I know that a lot of it, look, we have this presidential election coming up here in the US. And so it feels as if the Biden administration has just been trying to kind of get Kiev along, right? Get them to the point of November 5th, and then we'll figure out the rest of it later. But Zelensky came to the US a few weeks back. He had this grand quote unquote victory plan, very overhyped. And what it actually says, we don't know the actual text, but what has been reported on it is basically he's asking all of NATO to start World War III with Russia, right? He wants the US to lift restrictions on Kiev's use of long-range missiles on Russian territory. He wants Ukraine to be added in as a member of NATO, which course is a non-starter, because that would then spark World War III immediately. But it's like he keeps asking for more and more from the NATO alliance, and then he's calling this a victory plan, which, it's not surprising to me given his peace plan that he's been putting out there for the last 2 years, is basically calling for Russia's unconditional surrender. But right now he's on a tour of Europe trying to continue to sell that plan. And when it comes to what's actually happening on the battlefield, it's really interesting to watch, because you've had for several months now almost a standstill on the front lines, right? This is a war of attrition. You have Russia taking some territory here and there.
Even New York, sorry, just real quick, even New York Times at the end of last year published how much ground had changed over the course of the entire year. And it's, of the entire country, it's little fractions, millimeters of land, if you actually look at the size of the country. So it's very little movement.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see how Russia is just kind of on their end. It's almost as if they're trying to go after and kill as many Ukrainian troops as they can because Kiev just keeps throwing forces at them. I mean, that's why they've called it a meat grinder. It's like, okay, they
Yeah.
just keep killing guys on the front lines. And a couple months ago, you had Ukraine decide that, you know what, not much is happening on the front lines. So we're going to launch this incursion into Russia's Kursk region right over the border. They send thousands of troops there. And I guess they thought that it was going to make Russia like turn around and divert all of their attention to Kursk. But the opposite of that has happened. Now Ukraine is struggling to keep that going, also struggling to keep things going on the front lines. And the result of that has been that you're seeing significant Russian advances, and they're getting really close to the Ukrainian stronghold of Pokrovsk in the Donbass region, which basically means that not only is that their stronghold, but that's what they rely on for all of their supply lines and to keep things going for their forces there. So, yeah, it's fascinating to see there are some significant updates, but here in the US, I feel like we don't hear about that. And I think that there's a reason that we don't hear about that because you have the US government in this position where they are just so incredibly invested in Ukraine that they can't admit that there's any, not just that there's losses, but that they don't really know how to quote unquote win this thing, right? There is no actual victory plan short of the US getting involved and actually starting World War III, in which case we all lose.
Yeah, well put. Speaking of no actual victory plan, before I let you go, I want to talk for a moment about Israel, and it really does have a lot to do with media. Like, it's just it blows my mind. As cynical as I am about the American people, about Western media, it blows my mind that we could have, people being burned alive on your feeds every day, and yet Israel just continues, and the U.S., at least the ruling elites, act like, oh, well, this is what we all want, right? We all want Israel just to continue this massacre. Both Harris and Trump wholly support it. I don't know. Do you feel like there's any kind of shift in where things are headed, or the media coverage? Or, I mean, you see some shifts, like Ta-Nehisi Coates, one of the most well-known writers in the entire United States, has now put out a book that basically puts forward the Palestinian cause. And so you're seeing some shift, I think, in sentiment. But
Yeah, it's been interesting over the last year to watch as I mean, I think if you would have asked me over a year ago now, if there was a live stream genocide being carried out before all of our eyes, if we could see the images and the videos and how horrific this was, if we had access to the death toll of how many children were being killed, would the US not just support that, but actively enable that? And maybe I would have said yes because I'm pretty cynical too. But I think watching it happen and watching the Biden administration do absolutely nothing to the point where they look pathetic, right? Biden and Blinken and Lloyd Austin and all of the rest of them, they look ridiculous because every time they come out and they go, oh, yeah, we want to see some kind of ceasefire, Israel just goes, commits another massacre, bombs another refugee camp or a hospital. And you're right. It's like we're able to see all of this before our eyes. And I think for a lot of people, that has changed the way that they view Israel, that has woken them up to the reality that the Palestinians have faced for decades now. But I mean, I still have a lot of concern because as bad as things have been for the last year, Israel's still marching forward. I mean, they're
yeah,
talking about a possible attack against Iran. The US is like, yeah, go ahead, whatever. They just seem to want to sign off on what targets are hit. Iran has already said, if you attack us, we are going to retaliate again and we're going to keep escalating. So, yeah, I think it's kind of a mix of being in that place of going, okay, more people are waking up. I have more hope for the public in ways that I haven't had in the past. But at the same time, when it comes to those ruling elites, they show no signs of backing down. I mean, Trump certainly doesn't. Kamala Harris, even though she'll throw out some lip service to the Palestinians, she's not showing any significant sign of realizing what is truly at stake here. And it's incredibly concerning all around, especially as we have this lame duck president in office for the next few months. And then we have the next year of, well, I don't know what to expect, but it doesn't seem like any of it's going to be good for the Palestinians, at least as things stand right now.
Biden being a lame duck is an insult to ducks, I think. But
Fair.
thank you so much, Rachel, for being here. I want to make sure people follow your platforms because obviously with your stuff like mine, people really have to try and chase us around to find out where we are and what's not being canceled. But where can people follow your work?
Yeah, so I am on YouTube at the moment, but I would encourage you to follow me just about anywhere else. I'm on Substack at rachelblevins.substack.com. Also on Patreon, patreon.com/rachelblevins. And that's where I have an exclusive weekly series called Sanction, which is just for my paid subscribers. So if y'all want to check that out, I would greatly appreciate it, especially in the very uncertain times that we're living in for independent media here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Don't give up.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rachel Blevins. Good to talk to her again. It has been a while, and I hope that all of her shows keep going. The ones that remain, at least. Okay, so this is just broken before, just in the hours before I started live streaming here. By the way, please click the thumbs up, click share, all those good things. But it seems like it is slowly being confirmed that Israel has killed Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar. Was killed Wednesday. His body identified by Israeli authorities. For a while, people were saying this is mostly just coming from the IDF, which means it might not be true. But now it seems like others are starting to verify it. Now, does this impact the way Hamas will behave, the way Israel will behave? From what I've seen, not really. Maybe certain decisions will be slightly different, but when someone is taken out at the top of Hamas, there is another person to become the head of Hamas. So this also points to the fact that Israel actually, I know they'll be pointing to this as, oh, look what we did, look at what we achieved, we're winning, etc. But this really points to how they're not really achieving anything, because is Hamas going to continue on? Yeah, I think they probably are. The idea that Israel is going to kill Hamas, like stop Hamas, is laughable. And of course, when you kill someone's family, you generally create more Hamas. So as Israel commits this genocide across Gaza, they are creating an endless number of Hamas fighters, which seems to be just fine with them, apparently. But this is a big update in terms of, the various players in this. And by the way, Yahya Sinwar, who was the head of Hamas, spent something like 20 years in Israeli prisons. So if you want to know how to make a Hamas fighter, well, you put them in Israeli prisons, tortured for 10 or 20 years, and that tends to do it. Another way is to kill their whole family. That tends to do it. So good on you, Israel, creating just an endless number of Hamas fighters. Well done in that regard. Just want to cover some of your comments real quick. Twin says, just found your channel again. I remember you from the Moment of Clarity videos. Thank you, Twin, for finding it again. Yes, it is tough to chase me around. I understand that. Larry Roberts says, thank you, Lee, for having on Rachel. Matthew says, Rachel, stay strong. Thank you, Ivan, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Dan, 1999, says, me and Rachel are forced to be reckoned with. Thank you. Michael says, imagine if everyday common Americans were as smart as Blevins and Camp. What a different world it would be. You guys are very kind. Thank you so much for the words of encouragement. Let's keep going here. Netanyahu's party. So we were told, as this goes on, as the genocide continues, as the attacks on Gaza continue, we were told, right, that Israel has no intent of taking over Gaza, right? Or by various, the propaganda varies here to there, but a lot of it was like, oh no, we're going after Hamas, right? That was what that's our goal, to go after Hamas, not to take over Gaza, not to annihilate every Gaza, not ethnic cleansing. That's not our goal. We're just going after Hamas, right? Well, Netanyahu his party has just invited Israelis to a resettling Gaza event. So about that whole weird going after Hamas thing, Netanyahu has just invited Israelis to basically come and take over Hamas. The IDF said it struck strategic weapons stored by Hezbollah, an underground facility in Beirut. That's what they always say when they kill a lot of civilians. We hit strategic, fill in the blank. EU countries contributing to UNIFIL, which is a UN agency, have no intention of pulling back troops despite calls from Israel to withdraw. The IDF says it allowed 50 aid trucks into Gaza. The UK Prime Minister Starmer says his government is considering sanctions against Israeli ministers. So those are some updates from Haaretz. Trying to see if I can find out more details from, here it is. Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party circulated an invitation to an event near the Gaza border titled Preparing to Settle Gaza. The event, scheduled for next week, will feature the construction of a sukkah as part of the City of Sukkahs initiative by the Nachala movement, which is known for establishing illegal outposts in the West Bank. Several Likud members, as well as government ministers, such as far-right ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich, are expected to attend. So a big fun event to celebrate the settling of Gaza, which they had initially said they are not involved in, right? They're just going for Hamas. Wow, big donation from TF. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for the super chat. Really do appreciate it. And by the way, later in this show, we're going to get into new revelations about how Israel controls our news. The news in the U.S., in Western mainstream media. There are aspects of this that I was unaware of, and I imagine you will be. So always important to find out where the propaganda is coming from. Speaking of propaganda, here's Brianna Joy Gray posting about Wall Street Journal board manufacturing consent for Israel to murder peacekeepers. This is from the Wall Street Journal. They wrote a headline, UN peacekeepers are Hezbollah's best friend. This is after Israel has managed to kill many UN peacekeepers. They've killed more UN peacekeepers and staff than have been killed in any conflict ever. They managed to do that in a year. But this is the Wall Street Journal basically trying to get people to endorse the murder of UN staff. Here's a comment from Ajamu Baraka. I've had him on this show. He's the former vice presidential candidate for the Green Party. He says the West continues their lesson for global humanity by exposing their moral degeneracy. And for what? To defend racism and colonialism in Palestine. And he's right. It is kind of a lesson, isn't it? You're kind of learning a lesson. For those who were uninitiated, for those who haven't been really studying this stuff, there's a nice lesson to see that how the world works, right? That the ruling elite of the United States, along with many other countries that are kind of vassal states to the U.S., and the ruling media structure, they all are more than willing to endorse genocide. They're more than willing to see videos of children being burned alive and say, yep, go at it. And I'm going to bring you more evidence of that in a few minutes. I think it's probably going to be a special segment for subscribers watching Bill Maher and Dr. Phil celebrate and support genocide. It is such a heartwarming segment between the two of them. And by the way, in the U.S. media landscape, Dr. Phil and Bill Maher are viewed somewhere in the center. Some people think that Bill Maher's left-wing. He's not. I know Dr. Phil supports Donald Trump or something. So some people know he's kind of right-ish. But they're not viewed as like Alex Jones. They're not viewed as, KKK members. This is kind of the centrist U.S. policy is to celebrate burning children alive, which again is pretty revelatory for a lot of Americans. Like a lot of Americans didn't know this. So this is interesting. This is an interesting article. This next one in Haaretz. But it's written by, I bring this to you because, sorry to restart my sentence 4 times. Let's see if I can restart it a 5th time. It's one thing to say, oh, Israel's going to collapse. Like, or someone who I often agree with on most of their takes says Israel's going to collapse. And I bring you that because I still think it's important, if it's Chris Hedges or it's Scott Ritter or something. But it's a different kind of interesting to see it being said by like IDF commanders that Israel could collapse soon. Like that's a different kind of revelation, of understanding, of a different kind of news. And here is in Haaretz, this is Yitzhak Brick, who is, let's see, where does it say? What is Major General Yitzhak Brick served in the Army Corps as a brigade, division, and troops commander of the IDF, and he was the commander of the IDF military colleges. So this is an IDF Israeli through and through. He bleeds blue and white. It doesn't have the quite the same ring to it as I bleed red, white, and blue. It's got a little better ring to it, but this guy bleeds blue and white. Anyway, long-term IDF commander. And he has written that Israel will collapse within a year if, he says, the war of attrition against Hamas and Hezbollah continues, which it seems to be going in that path. And so his point on writing this is to try and influence the ruling elite of Israel to stop their war of attrition against Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, of course, because he's pro-Israeli, he's not calling it a genocide. He's calling it a war. There's plenty of propaganda in here like that. But this is a big deal to know that even pro-Israel, pro-IDF, long-term IDF military men are saying Israel will collapse. He says most of the pretentious declarations made by Defense Minister Yoav Gallant throughout the war in Gaza have proven to be groundless. After the occupation of Gaza City, he said that Israel was in total control of the city and its tunnels. Within a short time, Hamas would surrender. After the occupation of Khan Yunis, he claimed that Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar was running in the tunnels by himself and had lost control of his men, and within a few days, he would be caught. Now, of course, this happened to come out the day that Yahya Sinwar was killed, but his point still stands. With these pronouncements, Gallant, along with his colleagues, IDF Chief Staff Herzi Halevi and Prime Minister Netanyahu, has been throwing dust in the eyes of Israel's public. It seems that he has begun, speaking about Yoav Gallant, it seems that he has begun to realize that failing to reach a hostage deal with Hamas would lead to a regional war that would put Israel in serious danger. I assume the Defense Minister Gallant already understands that the war has lost its purpose. Even Israelis, even former IDF, are saying Israel, that their aim, that their war has lost its purpose. Even they're saying that. Now, I would say their purpose was genocide to begin with, but either way, Israel is sinking deeper into the Gazan mud, losing more and more soldiers as they get killed or wounded without any chance of achieving the war's main goal, bringing down Hamas. The country really is galloping towards the edge of an abyss. If the war of attrition against Hamas and Hezbollah continues, Israel will collapse within no more than a year. The reservist army is voting with its feet following recurring mobilizations of combat soldiers, meaning the reservists are leaving. The economy is also crashing. I've brought to you many pieces of proof that the economy in Israel is collapsing. Apparently, when I brought it to you, 43,000 businesses had collapsed in Israel, and that estimate was going to, they were estimating 65,000 by the end of the year. Israel has also become a pariah state, prompting economic boycotts and an embargo on arms shipments. We are losing our social resilience as the growing hatred between different parts of the nation threatens to ignite and bring to its destruction from within. And, you know, one can only hope all of this will happen. When someone is committing a genocide that's killed 42,000 people, actually 200,000 if you count the famines and if you count the famine and death by disease, etc., it's the moral thing to hope that said nation state stops being able to do that, and the only thing that seems to stop them is their collapse. He continues, Netanyahu has lost his humanity, his basic morality, norms, and values, and responsibility for Israel's security. He's lost his humanity, his basic morality, and his norms. And that statement also goes for anyone who supports Israel right now. This is fucking IDF saying this. And it goes for anyone who supports Israel right now. The media, the U.S. media, the British media, the British ruling elite, the U.S. ruling elite in Canada and other countries, whoever is supporting this, either tacitly or implicitly, it doesn't matter. They have proven they are morally bankrupt. They've lost their morality. They've lost their humanity. And that's full stop. That's what this is. That's what this is. And like I said, I'm going to do a special segment later about Bill Maher and Dr. Phil. They seem to have completely lost their humanity. They've lost their ability to understand what is moral in a world where you're watching people burn on your screens, burn to death, where you're watching children obliterated under buildings. It's unbelievable to see this many people lose their ability to tell right from wrong, even mildly. And the U.S. is, of course, fully involved in all this. As we see, here's the New York Times saying that U.S. stealth bombers are now attacking weapons caches in Yemen. So U.S. stealth bombers are bombing Yemen. And explain to me again how that doesn't mean we're at war with Yemen. Because that sounds a lot like we're at war with Yemen. U.S. bombers. This is not the thing where we give missiles to Israel and then they shoot them at Yemen. This is us in our bombers over Yemen, bombing their weapons, bombing their country. That sounds a lot to me like we're at war with Yemen. Huh. I didn't know that. I thought Congress gets to declare a war. Oh, no, apparently not. Apparently we can bomb whatever the fuck we want. Doesn't matter. Doesn't count as war anymore. And that's the New York Times right now. Also, this video this is U.S. Civil Defense News saying U.S. troops and American air defenses are now fully deployed in Israel, ready for the coming war with Iran. So this is U.S. military people walking off the plane in Israel, and that certainly sounds like this is a U.S.-backed genocide. Please tell me again how you're arguing this isn't a U.S.-backed genocide, because this looks a lot like it. And then there's video of U.S. military standing with Netanyahu. But no, this isn't a U.S.-backed genocide. This is Israel they're doing it with, and we don't want them to, right? That's what Kamala Harris will tell you, right? And Biden, that Netanyahu, stop bombing those kids. It's just bullshit. It's just utter bullshit fed to you. I don't know. I'll let you guys decide. Which is worse? Which do you view as worse? Is it Harris-Biden administration saying, it's we really wish Netanyahu would stop, and meanwhile shipping weapons to him every 36 hours? Or is it Donald Trump saying, finish the job, kill every Gazan, who cares? Which is worse? The end result's the same, it seems to me. But which one's more upsetting? And I'm not asking which you should vote for, because fuck that. I'm just saying, Which of those is more offensive? Oh, it's unbelievable. And I wanted to bring you just real quick. This is reposted by Sam Husseini, who I had on the other day. Sam Husseini does great reporting. He's also the creator of votepact.org, PACT.org. And anyway, he reposted this article, and the title of the article is a quote that says, text me, you haven't died. And this is written by Ramzi Baroud, and he says, my sister was the 166th doctor to be murdered in Gaza. And this is not, I know of other people. I'm friends with people. I know people who are close enough with people in Gaza and West Bank who this is a common text thread. Just text me every day and tell me you haven't died. And this is, like I said, this is common. This has become the new norm. Just text me you haven't died. And obviously sometimes you don't get that text and most people assume the worst. And sometimes it's not true. Sometimes it means they lost their phone. Sometimes it means their internet cut out. Sometimes it means the building where their phone was got blown up, but they didn't. Whatever. But often it does mean the worst. Often, for those of us that are so far away from this, from Gaza, from Palestine, you just never hear from the person again. And anyway, he talks about how his sister was a doctor in Khan Yunis, and she was the IDF bombed the taxi she was in. And I kind of, this headline caught my attention. I mean, there's a million gut-wrenching headlines about Palestine, but it caught my attention because I realized, I don't know, just I hadn't thought much about it, that this is such a common thing, that there are millions of people around this world right now that daily have the conversation, text me that you haven't died. It's just so fucking disgusting. All right. And later I'll be bringing you how Bill Maher thinks it's awesome. But right now I want to get to, and so this is 2 days in a row, but listen, somebody does good shit. I got to bring it to you. And I want to bring you another Alan McLeod article. This one revealing that Israeli spies, at least some of the time, like literally Israeli spies, are writing American news, or writing U.S. news. And it gets basically no coverage. There's no discussion of it. Alan McLeod over at Mint Press says, 1 year after October 7th attacks, Netanyahu is on a winning streak. That's a quote. That was the title of an Axios article describing the Israeli prime minister riding on the unbeatable waves of triumph. So Axios was talking about how awesome Netanyahu was doing. These stunning military successes, its author Barak Ravid notes, include the bombing of Yemen, the assassination of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh and Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, and the pager attack across Lebanon, which was, of course, a terrorist attack, but that's not in the Axios article. The same author recently went viral for an article that claimed that Israeli attacks against Hezbollah are not intended to lead to war, but are an attempt to reach de-escalation through escalation. What was that? I do not think that word means what you think it means. But what almost everybody missed is that Barak Ravid is an Israeli spy, or at least he was until very recently. Ravid is the former analyst with the Israeli spying agency Unit 8200. I've mentioned that on the show before. As recently as last year, was still a reservist with the IDF. Ravid is far from the only Israeli ex-spook working at top U.S. media outlets, working hard to manufacture Western support for his country's genocide. In April, he won the prestigious White House Press Correspondence Award. That's right. It's not just that you have former IDF, former Israeli spies working at a U.S. outlet, not revealing that they're former IDF, former Israeli spies, but they're also winning the top awards at the White House press correspondence group. They won that award for overall excellence in White House coverage, one of the highest awards in American journalism. Judges were impressed by what they described as his deep, almost intimate levels of sourcing in the U.S. and abroad, and picked out 6 articles as exemplary pieces of journalism. Most of these stories consisted of simply printing anonymous White House or Israeli government sources, making them look good, and distancing Biden from the horrors of the Israeli attack on Palestine. As such, there was functionally no difference between these and the White House press releases. Ravid was personally presented with the award by President Biden, who embraced him like a brother. That a known former Israeli spy could hug Biden in such a manner speaks volumes about not only the intimate relationship between the United States and Israel, but about the extent to which establishment media holds power to account. Founded in 1952, Unit 8200 is the Israeli military's largest and most controversial division, responsible for covert operations, spying, surveillance, and cyber warfare. Since October 7, 2023, the group has been at the forefront of the world's attention. It is widely identified as the organization behind the infamous pager attack on Lebanon, which killed 9 people, injured 3,000. Several of those who were killed were children or nurses. Here's another one. Sacher Paled spent 3 years as an officer in Unit 8200, leading a team of analysts in surveillance, intelligence, and cyber warfare. She also served as a technology analyst for the Israeli intelligence service Shin Bet. In 2017, she was hired as a producer and writer by CNN and spent 3 years putting together segments for Fareed Zakaria and Christian Amanpour. Google later hired her to become their senior media specialist. Isn't it amazing? It's a big revolving door, but it's like a revolving door of like blood-covered lunatics. Like, it's just a revolving, just blood dripping down each segment of the revolving door as they all go through it. Kind of like zombie-ish blood stripping down their mouth, dripping off their hands. And it's like, come in. Yeah, we're CNN. Where were you? Oh, you just helped murder people in bed. Come on in. Oh, where were you? Oh, you helped murder people over there. Okay, come on in. Absolutely. We're the White House press corps. Oh, sure. We'll give you an award. Another Unit 8200 agent who went on to work for CNN is Tal Heinrich. Heinrich spent 3 years as a Unit 8200 agent between 2014 and 2017. She was the field and news desk producer for CNN's notorious pro-Israel Jerusalem bureau, where she was one of the principal journalists shaping America's understanding of Operation Protective Edge, Israel's bombardment of Gaza that killed more than 2,000 people and left hundreds of thousands displaced. Heinrich later left CNN. And where did she go? She's now the spokesman for a young whippersnapper named Benjamin Netanyahu. CNN's, isn't that a great revolving door, going from Israeli spy unit 8200 to CNN to spokesperson for Netanyahu. That's an awesome revolving door right there. I'm surprised they don't, when they're going through the revolving door, I'm surprised they don't slip more on all the puddles of blood. You think it'd be a lot of, and then they just face plant. Because I don't, like, a revolving door would be pretty difficult in that, like when you're shin deep in blood. CNN's penchant for hiring Israeli state figures continues to this day. Tamer Michaelis, for example, currently works for the network, producing much of its Israel-Palestine content. This is despite having previously been an official IDF spokesperson in the Israeli Defense Forces. The New York Times, meanwhile, hired Anat Schwartz, who I've talked about before, an ex-Israeli Air Force intelligence officer with zero journalistic experience. Schwartz co-wrote the infamous and now discredited Screams Without Words expose, which claimed that Hamas fighters systematically sexually violated Israelis on October 7th, despite the fact they never found any evidence that they had violated Israelis on October 7th. And in fact, in later podcasts, she talked about the fact that her job for the article was to find evidence, witnesses, rape center calls, and she talked to everybody across all of Israel, every trauma person, and could not find a single one. Couldn't find a victim. And some people go, oh, well, the victims are dead. But the problem is there's more than that, right? There's endless video coverage of October 7th. There's phone calls, there's texts, there's other evidence, other forensic evidence. Zero of any of it. And yet they wrote the article anyway. That shows stick-to-itiveness. They didn't find any evidence of the thing they wanted to find evidence for, but they stuck to it. And they wrote the article anyway. That's perseverance. That shows hard work. Don't give up just because there's no evidence of the thing you're saying there's evidence for. Keep going. Keep at it. That's the New York Times way. Multiple New York Times employees, including star columnist David Brooks, have had children serving in the IDF. By the way, don't use the term serving. It is a propaganda term. You don't serve in a genocidal military. You're just in a genocidal military. So they've had children in the IDF. Even as they report or offer opinions on the region, the Times never discloses these glaring conflicts of interests to its readers, that many of these writers have children that are part of the genocidal military. Nor has it disclosed that it purchased a Jerusalem house for its bureau chief that was stolen from a family of Palestinian intellectual Ghada Karmi. The family of Palestinian intellectual Ghada Karmi in 1948. And Mint Press has actually interviewed Karmi about it. Former New York Times Magazine writer and current editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, an American, dropped out of the University of Pennsylvania to volunteer as an IDF prison guard. He was so eager to be a part of genocide that he dropped out of college to go volunteer with the IDF. In his memoirs, Goldberg revealed that while in the IDF, he helped cover up the abuse of Palestinian prisoners. That's a nice thing to admit in your memoir. It's always nice to just, when you're writing a memoir, just, let people know about the things like covering up abuse of prisoners. Social media companies, too, are filled with former Unit 8200 agents. A 2022 Mint Press study found more than 99 former 8200 operatives working for Google. 99! Jesus! And it's far higher than that because as I covered that story back when it came out, it's far higher than that because 99 is the number that put it on their LinkedIn profile. It's like, hey, I used to be in an Israeli spy unit. So imagine if you included the ones who aren't revealing it on LinkedIn, it's probably much higher. Both the Times and CNN have fired multiple journalists over their opposition to Israeli action. So if you stand up against genocide, you're probably getting kicked out of these places. In November, the Times' Jasmine Hughes was forced out after she signed an open letter opposing genocide in Palestine. The newspaper terminated Hossam Salam's contract the previous year after a pressure campaign from pro-Israel group Honest Reporting. They're called Honest Reporting. Thou doth protest too much. And CNN anchored Mark Lamont Hill was abruptly fired in 2018 for calling the Palestinian liberation in a speech at calling for Palestinian liberation in a speech at the UN. Hiring agents from Unit 8200 to produce American news should be as unthinkable as employing Hamas or Hezbollah fighters as reporters. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Is like, can you imagine how it would go over if we found out that MSNBC or, NPR, several other reporters were former Russian military? How would that go over? If several of the reporters at the New York Times and Fox News were former Chinese military, former Iranian military. You think people would be fine with that? You think I go over? You think they'd win awards at the White House for their awesome press coverage? Fucking no. So I wanted to bring that story to you, because it is important to know how much of our news is being written by Israeli spies. And let's remember that these are just the ones that were in the IDF. I'm sure if you add in all the people that just used to have Israeli citizenship, used to be connected to AIPAC, Wolf Blitzer, used to be connected to other Israeli lobbying firms. If you add all those in, imagine those numbers of people that are somehow connected to the IDF, the Israeli government, the Israeli citizenship, any of these like crazy conflict of interest, but doesn't even get pictured. Get mentioned. And speaking of how much, whether this kind of support for genocide by our government, whether it impacts people's enthusiasm for our government and for the Democrats and the Republicans. Funny. This the other day, this is MSNBC noticing that by doing completely the opposite of everything their voters want, it has started to have an impact. It's from an account called Push Biden Left. But this is MSNBC noticing this stunning detail. It's a little hard to see, but here's black men ages 18 to 44. How much more they're voting Democrat than Republican. Under Obama, it was 81 points, 81% more voting for Obama than, I guess it depends on which Obama election, but whatever. I guess it was McCain. Then with Clinton, it was 63 points against Republicans. Then with Biden, it was plus 51. Now it's down to plus 41. That's black men 18 to 44, the difference between their voting for Democrats versus Republicans. And isn't this incredible that the Democrats have lost voters when they completely betray everything they claim to stand for? How odd is that? And here is the margin for black women. Weirdly, it gave the age of the first one. It doesn't give the age of this one. I guess it's also 18 to 44, but Obama was plus 93, Clinton plus 93, Biden plus 85, Harris plus 71. But this is MSNBC noticing that for some odd reason, when you completely betray your voters and stand for everything opposite of what you claim, it slowly has an impact on whether those voters will keep supporting you. So bizarre. I don't know how that happened. How did it happen? Okay, so I'm going to bring you one more story, not Israel related, and then I'm going to bring a special segment for those of you on locals. I'm going to rip apart Bill Maher and Dr. Phil as they celebrate genocide. Actually, that's not the only thing they talk about. They talk about a bunch of things. So I'm going to bring you that as well. But for those of you who aren't members over at leecamp.net, you could do that and enjoy this segment right now. All you have to do is go over to leecamp.net, scroll down to become a subscriber, and click that. And it's a whopping 38 cents an episode. And you'd be supporting this show. You'd be making this possible. And that would be so cool of you. leecamp.net. You can also do it on Patreon, patreon.com/leecamp. But the live streams don't go out to Patreon just because I don't have a way to do that. And then the other thing is, if you do sign up on Patreon, don't use iPhone app or iPad, because Apple takes 30%, which is insane, of everything you donate on Patreon. So there is almost no reason to sign up for someone's Patreon on an Apple platform. You can do it on your laptop. Like, you do it on an Apple laptop because that's different. They don't own the browsers. But if you do it on iPhone or an iPhone app, or you do it on your iPad app, they will steal 30%, which is nuts. Thank you, Michael, for putting it in the chat. LeeCamp.net will take you to my locals page, and you can sign up there to get this special segment. You'll get all kinds of special segments. You'll get both my ebooks, Dangerous Ideas and Bullet Points and Punchlines. You'll get with a forward from Chris Hedges. You'll get my comedy special, Laughing All the Way to Shitstorm. Lots of good things. Metal Rat says, Lee, I love the backdrop photo thing. I want to wallpaper my bathroom immediately. This would go well in a bathroom, wouldn't it? For those of you listening to the podcast, I have the collapsing U.S. empire behind me, the inside of the New York Metro. Let's see. Michael Gibson also said Israel has totally infiltrated the U.S. government. Voting against war said, yeah, really, they won't put that on their LinkedIn profile. Yeah, probably it's far greater than the number we're hearing. Ratso Harris says, I've lived with a bathroom like that for years. That's not good. That's not the best bathroom. Okay, one story that's not Israel related. For the love of God. This is... So I don't know much about this source, but to me, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to go through it, and you decide for yourself which side is probably telling the truth, the U.S. or those who are opposing U.S. propaganda. How the U.S. is convincing the Philippines to destroy itself. Hold on one second. The Southeast Asian state of the Philippines stood to rise alongside the rest of the region because China is now the largest economy in the world. So, yeah, it is a rising region. Until relatively recently, as the U.S. successfully convinced the Philippines to do otherwise, rather than working and trading together with China, which would make sense because it's like right there. It's like so close compared to the U.S. So much closer. It's like right there. So it would make sense for them to work economically with China, but the U.S. kind of owns the Philippines. It's like a vassal state. And therefore, the U.S. has convinced the Philippines not to work with China as an economic partner. It is, quote unquote, invited the United States, the Philippines' former colonial master, to build new military facilities across its territory using semantics and legal loopholes to sidestep the Philippines' own constitution and undermine its sovereignty in the process. Just as the U.S. politically captured Ukraine in Eastern Europe in 2014, that's when the Maidan coup was, and transformed it into a geopolitical battering ram against neighboring Russia at the expense of Ukraine's population. That sounds like a pretty accurate depiction of what happened there. The U.S. sunk Ukraine into a war with their neighbor, who should be their economic neighbor, Russia. And now hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dead. So many men are dead that the Ukrainian military is now resorting to asking 50-year-olds to be in the military because they don't have any young men left. It is now repeating the process with the Philippines via China. What are the mechanisms Washington is using to convince an entire nation to race towards conflict and self-destruction? A vast network of propaganda. And they talk about the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which even the former head of the NED said the NED is a CIA cutout, used to be part of the CIA, now does the same things it was doing then, but it just doesn't call itself the CIA. The NED does this through targeting every aspect of a nation, state from its political system to academia, from its courts and legal system to a nation's information space. Then next up, funding disinformation, spending hundreds of millions of years to fund disinformation. There's a lot of propaganda pumped into Philippines. A long-run policy to contain China. The U.S. seeks to convince the Philippine public to give up trade, economic development, and infrastructure projects with China and instead invest public funds into military spending ahead of what will likely be a Ukraine-style proxy war against China. I mean, I hope it's not likely, but could be. The centerpiece of Washington's political capture and exploitation of the Philippines is the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement it uses to build military facilities across Philippine territory. Because everywhere the U.S. builds military facilities, it all goes well, right? It never harms. Those places never end up sunken into war. They never end up captured by the U.S. government. It always goes well when we put our guns there. The facilities contribute toward a wider regional strategy of military encircling, I guess it's encirclement, and containment of China, a foreign policy objective pursued by Washington since the end of World War II. So this article is just saying that Philippines, despite what would be obviously in their best interest to work economically with partners in the region, is a combination of being tricked and pressured into becoming another war, like battleship for the United States against China. I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, we've basically, the Philippines has basically been a puppet to the United States for a while now, but they could have, they could go a very different path, it seems. And like I said, I don't, media literacy is important. It's important to know where these sources come from. I don't know the background of that source, but I'm asking you to decide which sounds more reasonable, that the United States has the best interests of the Philippines at heart and wants to fill them with guns because it's just good for them, or that, like this article saying, the U.S. plans to use them as a battering ram against China, which could ultimately kill a lot of Filipinos and destroy their country. Oh, you guys sucks. You know what I just realized, guys? We're like assholes. Just like total assholes. Okay. Just like to conclude with that. All right, I'm going to go bring an extra segment on Bill Maher and Dr. Phil. Two media icons, just filled with truth and love. I'm going to bring that to everybody over at Locals. So if you're at Locals, please hang in there. Just give me a second to switch the streams. And for everybody else, a couple of quick things. I will be back tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I have a new podcast called Just Comedy. You can find it usually by typing in Just Comedy with Lee Camp. You can also find it on my Linktree. And I also have a new comedy Zoom event, which will be December 11th and 14th. And if you want more on that, that is at leecamp.simpletix.com. I was going to put that up on the screen for you. leecamp.simpletix.com, TIX, simpletix.com. And you can find out about it, what it's like, what you're involved in. And the cost is a whopping $5. It can sell out. I know it seems weird just to think that something online could sell out, but the Zoom membership I have only allows, I think, 500 attendees. So I hope to see you there. But grab your tickets now, December 11th and 14th. All the details are there, leecamp.simpletix.com. Opening performers, assuming all goes well this time, will be Jonathan O'Donnell, Naomi Caravani, and Eleanor Goldfield. John and Naomi, from Redacted tonight. All right. I'm headed over to Locals. Thank you, guys. And keep fighting. And I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, everybody at Locals, what is up, man?